या फौजी थी, उन्होंने उस तसलसल को एक न एक रंग में कायम रखा। झगड़ा शुरू उस वक्त हुआ जब बलूचिस्तान को जबरदस्ती पाकिस्तान में शामिल किया गया। बलूचिस्तान के दो ऐवानों ने, ऐवान बाला और ऐवान ज़ेरी ने, जो उस वक्त इलेक्ट होके आए थे, एक इलेक्ट एक नॉमिनेट होके आया था, दोनों ने मुत्तफ़िक़ा तौर पर पाकिस्तान के साथ शमूलियत को मशरूत बनाया था, जिसको उस वक्त की हुकूमत, जिसको जिन्ना साहब लीड कर रहे थे, और जो रियासत कलात के वकील थे, जिन्होंने कलात की इस हैसियत को वहां जाके अंग्रेजों के साथ तस्लीम कराया था कि कलात की और नेपाल की एक हैसियत है, बाकी रियासत की तरह ये नहीं है। उसके अपने लिए हुए फैसले के खिलाफ उन्होंने बलूचिस्तान के इस फैसले को नहीं माना, दोनों ऐवानों के, और उन्होंने बलूचिस्तान में फौज भेज दी। खान कलात को नजरबंद किया गया, उसके भाई को गिरफ्तार किया गया, सैकड़ों और बलोचों को गिरफ्तार करके वहाँ फौज को कायम रखा गया। ये वही खिश्त अव्वल थी जो टेढ़ी रखी गई थी, और आज तक जो आप देख रहे हैं कि मीनार जो है ये सीधा नहीं जा रहा है बल्कि टेढ़ा जा रहा है। इब्तिदा वहां से हुई। अब उस इब्तिदा का नतीजा ये हुआ कि दोनों फरीकैन के दरमियान, बलोचों के दरमियान ये ख्वाहिश पैदा हो गई कि हम पे जबरी कब्जा किया गया है, और पाकिस्तान जो हुक्मरान थे, जो बदकिस्मती से सियासतदान नहीं थे बल्कि ब्यूरोक्रेट्स थे, उन्होंने इस सिचुएशन को एक्सप्लॉइट किया, और वहां के हर बच्चे को जो पैदा होता था उसको शक की निगाह से देखते थे, और आज तक देखते आ रहे हैं। इसकी वजाहत करता चलूं कि हम में से कई एक इस दौरान वजारतों में भी आए हैं, हुकूमतें बनाई हैं, तो ये उसी कोशिश का एक नतीजा था कि हमने बारहा हुकूमत में शमूलियत करके पाकिस्तान के आइन के साथ भी हमने उसको सीने से लगा के हमने कहा कि चलो अब इसी उसमें हम भी हमारे यारां दोज़ख हमारे यारां बहिश्त कॉल जो है कबूल करके हम करेंगे। शायद अब उनको हम पे एतबार आ गया है, हम पे एतबार करें, लेकिन हर बार हमारी इस कोशिश का बड़ा सख्ती से और एक मुंह तोड़ जवाब देके हमारे मुंह पे मारा गया। अब एक कोशिश नहीं हुई, लेकिन हर दूसरी बार जो इसको हमने रिबाउंस होते देखा हमारी कोशिश को, तो उसमें चोट कुछ ज्यादा ही नजर आई हमें। आप पहले ऑपरेशन को देखें, आप दूसरे को देखें, आप तीसरे को देखें, और चौथे पे आप देखेंगे तो उसमें हमें चोटें कुछ ज्यादा नजर आएंगी। आखिरी जो ऑपरेशन था उसमें नवाब अकबर खान बुगटी, बालाच मरी, इनकी शहादतें भी शामिल हैं। भुट्टो साहब के दौर में जिस आइन को कहते हैं कि बलोचों ने तस्लीम किया गया, उस आइन में एक शक है जो नजर नहीं आती, इनविजिबल शक है। बलोचों का कत्लेआम जो है वो शक नजर नहीं आती, वो सिर्फ हम अपनी आंखों से देख सकते हैं, बाहर के बैठे हुए आदमी नहीं देख सकते। उसमें मेरा एक लड़का भी उस मजमे में था जो मुझे फिर नजर नहीं आया, तो मैं अब तक ये गुमान करता हूँ कि शायद वो भी इसी में मारा गया होगा, अगर उनके पास नहीं होगा, जो नहीं है। तो ये सिलसिला जो था, हमारी तरफ से कोशिश जो थी, ये उसका नतीजा था कि हम हुकूमतों में जाते थे, असम्बलियों में जाते थे, आइन में उनकी हिमायत करते थे, लेकिन वहां से जो जवाब मिलता था वो बंदूक की गोली से जवाब मिलता था। अब वो मकाम आ पहुंचा है जहां हम इस नतीजे पे पहुंचे हैं कि इस मुल्क में हमारा गुजारा नहीं हो सकता।
हर उस आदमी से आज़ादी चाहूंगा जो मुझे अपना गुलाम रखना, जो मुझे अपना भाई रखना चाहेगा मैं उसके साथ रहने को तैयार हूँ, लेकिन जो मुझे अपना गुलाम रखना चाहेगा मैं तो चाहूंगा कि उसके मुंह पे 10 दफा थूकूं, मैं उसका गुलाम नहीं रहूंगा। मेरा जी चाह तो मरना मैं पसंद करूंगा, गुलाम नहीं रहना पसंद करूंगा मैं। सरदार जिनका आप खुद इकरार करते कोई कि आपके साथ है, ये 3 सरदार, अगर मामला 3 सरदारों का होता तो आपके लिए इतनी बात नहीं थी। आप सारे बलूचिस्तान के अवाम को इन 3 सरदारों के पैसे पीछे किस तरह छुपाना चाहते हैं? कैसे छुपेंगे बलूचिस्तान के लोग इन 3 सरदारों के पीछे? آپ ان 3 سرداروں کو آگے لے کے بلوچستان کے لوگوں کو آپ پیچھے رکھ کے چھپانا چاہتے ہیں کہ لوگ نہیں ہیں. مزاحمت جو ہو رہی ہے وہ لوگوں کی طرف سے ہو رہی ہے، اور آپ کے اعمال کے خلاف جو عمل وہاں ہو رہا ہے وہ لوگوں کی طرف سے ہو رہا ہے. یہ اور بات ہے کہ ہم لوگوں کے اس مزاحمت یا اس کے اس رویے میں یا ان کی اس تحریک میں ان کے ساتھ ہیں، لوگوں کے ساتھ ہیں. لوگ ہمارے کہنے پہ نہیں ہیں، ہم لوگوں کے ساتھ ہیں. اب یہ اپنا عیب چھپانے کے لیے یہ کہہ رہے ہیں کہ 3 سرداروں کی تھی. بدبختوں یہ تم اپنا اقرار کر رہے ہو اپنی کمزوری کا کہ تم اتنے کمزور ہو کہ 3 سرداروں نے تمہیں یہ مال بنا رکھا ہے. اب ان کو اس بات کی جب تمیز نہیں ہے تو ان کو اور کیا.
میں جو بات کر رہا ہوں بلوچستان کے آج مادی کی بات کر رہا ہوں، میں جو بات کر رہا ہوں بلوچستان کے انٹلیکچوئل کی بات کر رہا ہوں، میں پڑھے لکھے آدمی کی بات کر رہا ہوں، میں اسٹوڈنٹ کی بات کر رہا ہوں، میں ان لوگوں کی بات کر رہا ہوں. بلوچستان ان کا ہے. بلوچستان کے اس مسئلے کو وہ سمجھتے ہیں. بلوچستان کے اس مسئلے کو جو مسند نشین ہے اس وقت، جو حکومتی جماعتوں کا ساتھ دیتے ہیں، وہ نہیں ہے بلوچستان کے وارث. بلوچستان کے وارث وہی لوگ ہیں. نئی نسل جو آ رہی ہے بلوچستان کے لوگ وہی ہیں. یہ بیٹھے ہیں ہمارے بھائی ہیں کرسیوں پہ، آج بلوچستان کے صدقے روٹی ان کو مل رہی ہے. ہم ان کو منع نہیں کرتے ہیں، ہم ان کا ہمارا ساتھ نہیں ہے ان کا، ہمارا گلہ بھی ان سے نہیں ہے، کیونکہ ان کا ذہن جو ہے اس رسائی، ان کو اتنی رسائی نہیں ہے کہ وہ اس مسئلے کی تہ تک پہنچ سکے کہ بھئی وہ کیا کھو رہے ہیں اور کیا انہوں نے حاصل کیا ہے.
ڈیولپمنٹ کی مخالفت نہیں، ایکسپلائٹیشن کی مخالفت ہم کر رہے ہیں. ایکسپلائٹیشن بند کرو. آپ کو پتا ہے کہ 1952 سے پائپ لائن گیس کی جو چل رہی ہے، ٹھیک ہے. اب جب ہم نے محسوس کیا کہ نہیں بھائی ہمارے لیے نہیں ہے، آپ گیس پائپ لائن پہ دھماکہ ہوتا ہے، بلوچستان کے لوگ تو فریاد نہیں کرتے اس پہ کیا ہے گیس پائپ لائن اڑ گئی، کیوں ادھر جاتی نہیں ہے تو کیا فائدہ. لیکن فریاد ہوتی ہے پنجاب کا انڈسٹریلسٹ فریاد کرتا ہے. اور ہم یہ باتیں لوگوں کے مفاد کے لیے کر رہے ہیں. ہمارے ساتھ بحث کر کے ہمیں قائل کرو، نے ان کو کہا ہے، یا ہمیں قائل کرو یا قائل ہو جاؤ. اگر تم آ کے ساری بات کو اس پہ ختم کرو گے کہ نہیں یہ تو ہم کریں گے، یہ ہمارے بس میں ہے کرو گے، تو پھر ہمیں اس قسم کی باتیں نہ سننے کے لیے تیار ہیں نہ کرنے کے لیے تیار ہیں. کیونکہ یہ ہوئی بات طاقت کی. اور طاقت کی بات کا آپ انتظار کیجئے، آپ مارتے رہیے، ہم مار کھاتے رہیں گے اس وقت تک جب ہم مار دینے کے قابل ہوں گے. جب ہم مار دینے کے قابل ہوئے ہم بھی آپ کی ایسی گت بنائیں گے جس طرح آپ ہماری بنا رہے ہیں. اس وقت آپ کو اختیار ہے جتنا آپ چاہے بے شک ہماری مرمت کریں، اور ہم اس دن کا انتظار کریں گے جب ہم اس قابل ہوں گے کہ ہم آپ کی مرمت کریں.
ہمارا یہ ایجنڈا ہے اور اس پہ ہم بات کر سکتے ہیں.
سب سے پہلے یہ کہ کم از کم میں اپنی بات کرتا ہوں، مجھے کسی پہ بھی یہ یقین نہیں ہے جو ارباب اختیار میں لوگ آج تک 47 سے لے کر آج تک جو کرسیوں پہ مسند نشین جو رہے ہیں، مجھے ایک پر بھی یہ اعتماد نہیں ہے کہ وہ بلوچستان کے مسئلے میں یا سندھ کے مسئلے میں انکلوڈنگ سندھ وہ اس پہ مخلص ہے. قطعاً نہیں. جب آج سامنے والے آدمی کی اخلاص جو ہے وہ مشکوک ہو آپ کے سامنے، تو اس کے ساتھ سوائے وقت کو ضائع کرنے کے اور آپ کیا حاصل کر سکتے ہیں. بلوچستان کے وسائل کو بلوچستان کے لوگوں کے حوالے کر دیا جائے تو میں ایک بات، جتنی بڑی شرط مجھ سے کوئی لگا ہے میں اس شرط لگا کے کہہ سکتا ہوں کہ بلوچستان کے ہر نفس کو، چھوٹے بچے سے لے کر بوڑھے تک کو، بلوچستان گھر میں بیٹھے روٹی دے سکتا ہے جہاں تک اس کے وسائل کا تعلق ہے، بشرطے کہ اس کے اختیارات بلوچستان کے اپنے لوگوں کے پاس ہو، چاہے وہ چور ہے، چکا ہے، کچھ ہے، لیکن اختیارات اس کے پاس ہو. اگر اختیارات یہ اسلام آباد میں رہے تو اس ساری دولت کے ہوتے ہوئے بھی بلوچستان بھوکا مرے گا. کیوں؟ بلوچستان کی جیو پولیٹیکل سچویشن جو ہے اس کی وجہ سے آج پاکستان جو ہے دنیا کے نقشے پہ موجود ہے. آپ آج بلوچستان کو پاکستان سے علیحدہ کر لیں، پاکستان کی قیمت جا کے منڈی میں آپ لگائیں، اگر 2 پاکستانی ٹیڈی پیسے میں اس کو خریدا تو پھر مجھے کہیں کہ مجھ سے بیوقوف آدمی اور کوئی نہیں ہے. نہیں، چونکہ آج بلوچستان پاکستان کے قبضے میں ہے، پاکستان اسی خیرات کی بنیاد پہ جی رہا ہے، ورنہ اس پاکستان کو آج دنیا جو ہے وہ جینے نہیں دیتی، کب کی اس کو ختم کر چکی ہوتی. تو فورن ہینڈز انوالو ہیں، لیکن اس وقت وہ اسی حد تک انوالو ہیں کہ یہ پاکستان کے ساتھ رہے. ہم اسی دن کا انتظار کر رہے ہیں جب فورن ہینڈز کی ضرورت جو ہے وہ بدل جائے گی اور کہ پاکستان کے ساتھ اس کا رہنا جو ہے ان کے انٹرسٹ پہ نہیں ہے. وہ دن ہمارا ایک روشن مستقبل کا دن ہوگا اور ہم اس کا انتظار کر رہے ہیں.
میں آپ کو بلوچستان کا باسی سمجھا اور میں آج بھی اپنے آپ کو بلوچستان کا باسی اور بلوچستان کا رہنے والا سمجھتا ہوں. میں بلوچستان کے لیے لڑ رہا ہوں. بلوچستان کی جنگ میرے لیے بالکل ایسا فریضہ بن چکی ہے جیسے نماز ایک مسلمان کے لیے فرض بن چکی ہے. چاہے وہ اپنے ہاتھوں سے لڑوں، اپنے دل سے لڑوں، اپنے ذہن سے لڑوں یا کسی بھی طریقے سے، وہ میرے لیے اس کو آپ غداری کا نام نہیں دے سکتے. آپ اپنے لیے اس کو بغاوت کا نام دے سکتے ہیں اور میرے لیے تو ایک اعزاز ہے.
بلوچ نوجوانوں کو میں یہی کہوں گا کہ اگر لڑ سکتے ہو تو جی بھر کے لڑو، ورنہ اپنے ماں کو مت رلاؤ.
سیاست جو ہے وہ ٹکڑوں میں بٹی ہوئی ہے اور یہ میں نہیں کہتا ہوں کہ ایسے لاشعوری طور ہوا، باقاعدہ شعوری طور پر ہمارے رنگس اینڈ فائلز کے اندر باہر کے آدمی گھسے ہیں اور انہوں نے دانستہ طور ہمیں ٹکڑوں میں بانٹا ہے. اب اگر آپ کوئی بھی ڈویژن کی کال دیں گے کہ آپ 2 سے 4 ہوں، 4 سے 8 ہوں، آپ دیکھیں گے بہت سے لوگ ہیں 90 کہیں گے، لیکن یونٹی کال اگر آپ دیں گے تو لوگ سنی سنی کر کے چلے جائیں گے. اور یہ باہر کا جراثیم ہے، یہ باہر کا بیکٹیریا ہے، باہر کا وائرس ہے جو آ کے ہمارے اندر گھسے رہ گیا ہے. اسی دفعہ میں وہاں انگلینڈ میں تھا، جی ایس این والے لڑکے وہاں آئے تھے تو میں نے ان کو بھی یہ کہا، میں نے کہا بھائی دیکھو تمہارے اور بلوچستان کے نوجوانوں میں یہ آئی ایس آئی والوں نے بہت سے لوگ گھسیٹ دیے، ذرا ان سے ہوشیار رہو. تو انہوں نے کہا یار کہ ہم ان کو کیسے پہچانیں گے؟ میں نے کہا ان کی ایک نشانی ہے. اور کیا؟ میں نے کہا جس نے یونٹی کی مخالفت کی اس کو آئی سے ایک آدمی سمجھا. میں نے کہا کوئی سندھی نیشنلسٹ، کوئی بلوچ نیشنلسٹ یونٹی کی مخالفت نہیں کرے گا جب تک کہ یہ ان کا ایجنٹ نہ ہو. میں نے کہا یہ ان کی ایک پکی نشانی ہے اور یہ مجھ سے لکھ کے لے لو، اور میری جگہ پر اگر تم نے قسم کھائی تو کھا لو قسم، میں اس کا ذمہ دار ہوں، قیامت میں بولوں گا کہ بولو کہ یہ آئی سے ایک ایجنٹ ہے. میں آج آپ لوگوں کو بتانا چاہتا ہوں اور آپ سے درخواست کروں گا کہ ہر وہ شخص جو بلوچستان کے سود و ضیاع میں آپ کے ساتھ شریک ہے وہ بلوچستانی ہے، اور آپ اس سے بڑھ کر بلوچستان نہیں ہے، وہ پورا حقدار ہے. آپ کی شرط اس کی یہ ہے کہ بلوچستان کے سود و ضیاع میں آپ کے ساتھ شریک ہو. اگر بلوچستان کے سود و ضیاع میں میں شریک نہیں ہوتا ہوں تو مجھے بلوچ کہنے کا کوئی حق نہیں ہے، میں آپ کے ساتھ حقدار نہیں. میں آپ سے ایک درخواست کروں گا، وہ یہ ہے سرزمین کی خاک کے لیے اپنی ذمہ داریوں کا احساس کریں جو آپ پر بحیثیت نئی نسل کی عائد ہوتی ہے. اور یہ مت بھولیں کہ آپ آج تاریخ کے سامنے جواب دیں. کل مورخ جو آپ کی تاریخ لکھے گا وہ آپ سے پوچھ کے نہیں لکھے گا، آپ کے کردار کو دیکھ کے لکھے گا. اپنے آپ کو کوئی ایسا مقام اس تاریخ میں دیں جس پہ آپ کی آنے والی نسل فخر کر سکے، یہ نہ کہ وہ آپ دیکھ کے شرمندہ ہو. یہ گزارش میں نے آپ سے کرنی تھی اور انہی الفاظ کے ساتھ میں آپ سے
Thank you for your patience and for watching that video of Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Now, before as we are joined by distinguished speakers who will shed light on the life and legacy of Sardar Attaullah Mengal, but before I call the speakers on the stage, I would like to request you all to please stand up and join me in observing a minute of silence. Yeah. Please. Thank you very much. I would like to request our first speaker, Dr. Nasir Dashti. Dr. Nasir Dashti Saab is a prominent historian and intellectual, and he is the executive president of Baloch Human Rights Council and also the convener of Sindhi Baloch Forum. Dr. Nasir Dashti, if you could please come on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. The national liberation struggle is a complex phenomenon. It involves sacrifices of all kinds. It needed political maturity and perseverance. It needs strategies and tactics surpassing those employed by enemies. It needs leaders to streamline the program of national liberation in the protracted struggle, which may last for generations. In the long process of national struggle, leaders emerged, and some became famous and prominent, and with their exceptional deeds, they became inspirational personalities. If we look back at the 180 years history of Baloch national struggle, we find many prominent personalities who streamlined the activities of those involved in the strenuous and protracted struggle for the salvation of a nation. In the context of the last 70 years of struggle, with his courage, steadfastness, and sacrifices, Sardar Mengal became one of the icons and towering personalities of the nation. He became a legendary figure and source of inspiration for those involved in the tortuous struggle for the dignified existence of the Baloch. Sardar Mengal's journey of greatness began in 1950s. The first decade after the occupation of Balochistan by Pakistan in 1948 was the period when the Baloch horizons were engulfed in the dark shadows of despair, frustration, and a growing sense of total defeat and helplessness. Beginning from the British occupation in 1839, the situation for those involved in the national struggle was never favorable, but it became very daunting for them with the creation of Pakistan and the occupation of Balochistan by a client state created by a colonial power to serve its strategic interest in the region. The symbolic short-term armed resistance by Aga Abdul Karim against the occupation collapsed unceremoniously. There was a total ban on political activities in Balochistan. The Khalat State National Party, who was the majority party in the Balochistan Assembly, was banned by Pakistani authorities. Political activists were awarded harsh terms of imprisonment involving up to 10 years. The last Khan of the Baloch, instead of leading his nation, was hobnobbing with the aggressors. He was acting as a pawn of the Pakistani establishment. The factual position was that, by all accounts, the Baloch social and political horizons were shadowed with dark clouds of humiliation, fear, defeatism, doubts, and distrust. In these hours of despair, a few valiant political activists, one of them is fortunately present among us, and leaders and second cadre leaders, under tremendous pressures of all kinds, were continuing political activities clandestinely. In such circumstances, the joining of Sardar Mengal in the nationalist struggle was a gift from heaven and a stimulus and hope for them. Later, it was proved that, indeed, it was the beginning of a better future for the national resistance. In many ways, it was a blessing for the Baloch political activists in those difficult times when Sardar Mengal joined their ranks. Sardar Mengal was aware that engaging the might of Pakistani establishment was not an easy task at that time, when the whole Western Bloc was behind the aggressors. He understood that confronting and defeating such a mighty force was only a dream. But his greatness was that, to materialize this dream, he initiated a new era of hope in the Baloch politics of that dark period. Sardar Mengal and fellow Baloch leaders like Nawab Mari, Nawab Bukti, and Mir Bizanjo got the status of greatness because, despite the cognizance that they were not going to taste the fruit of their struggle in their lifetime, they sacrificed their privileged positions to set an example of the national struggle for the Baloch generations to come. As it is famously said that it is easy to be brave in front of an inferior enemy. It is easy to be brave when you have superior might. But the real bravery is to confront a mighty enemy face to face. The real bravery is to turn disappointing and adverse situations into helping tools. The real bravery is to withstand the obstacles and difficulties of various magnitudes with courage and perseverance. Facing the enemy and converting despair to hope was the real greatness of Sardar Mengal. If we could imagine the socio-political milieu of Balochistan in 1950s and 60s, upholding the torch of hope and the belief of final victory with a small number of political activists against tremendous odds, shows the dedication and political acumen of Sardar Mengal and his fellow leaders. The extraordinary character of Sardar Mengal was a product of many socio-cultural and political virtues, which made him one of the incomparable figures in Baloch history. Leaders are formed in the process of struggle. Within a few years of joining the struggle, he stood out as the most capable and valiant leader and became a towering personality in the Baloch national struggle. Within a few years, Sardar Mengal was recognized by friends and foes alike as a steadfast leader with extraordinary capabilities and a courageous fighter for the national rights of his people. Perhaps his faith in the Baloch will of resistance and the belief in the final victory of the Baloch over the aggressors were the basis of his steadfastness in his political journey. Although he suffered personal and material losses in his long struggle, he was rewarded with the immeasurable respect of the Baloch nation. Not only he became a role model for the Baloch youth of that period, but for the generations of the Baloch to come. Sardar Mengal died dreaming of a bright future for his people. The death of this indefatigable, versatile, and virtuous leader is saddening for the Baloch. His death is indeed a setback for the Baloch resistance. It is undoubtedly a blow. It is a hard blow for those who are giving sacrifices in many ways to counter the aggression of the occupying forces. It is a hard blow for the nation whose dream of salvation he could not materialize in his lifetime. But the struggle for national liberation involves sacrifices from generations of a subjugated nation. Sardar Mengal also did not foresee an immediate victory. With his demise, while Baloch and Balochistan are still under subjugation, the enemy must not conclude that they have defeated the ideas of Sardar Mengal. It is obvious that the enemies of the Baloch are joyful, but their joy is certainly short-term. The call of Sardar Mengal for a meaningful struggle has reached the receptive ears of millions of the Baloch throughout the world. His call has galvanized a generation of political activists. In his long political career, Sardar Mengal has created a multitude of mature political activists who are certainly committed to taking their nation towards the goal of final victory. With an unwavering commitment to national cause, he has left to the future generation of the Baloch the gift of his experience and knowledge, on which they can refine and enhance their ways of struggle. The Baloch certainly will recover from the hard blow of the death of Sardar Mengal. Their march to the destination certainly will continue. The extent to which he demonstrated a spirit of devotion to the cause of Baloch was enormous. And for this, the Baloch for generations to come should be grateful for this brave son of Balochistan. However, the expression of gratitude for the most admired of the personalities in the recent history of our nation is not enough. This generation of the Baloch must face the future with firmness, determination, and optimism as shown by him in his long and tortuous political journey. It is a fact that the Baloch are facing one of the gravest times in the history of their existence as a nation. But remembering the spirit of resistance shown by Sardar Mengal, the steadfastness he showed in his struggle is certainly a tool to uplift the spirit of those who are engaged in the relentless struggle for the dignity and sovereignty of the Baloch and Balochistan. Living up to the standard of Sardar Mengal's political character may not be an easy task, but it is the only way forward for reaching the cherished goal of national salvation. The best way to pay tribute to this legendary figure and the noblest of the Baloch leader is that, in the circumstances where the very existence of a nation is at stake, there should be a firm belief that giving in is not an option. The road for the Baloch national salvation has never been smooth. Circumstances are as unfavorable as they were at the time when Sardar Mengal and his associates were leading the struggle. There is again a feeling of helplessness. There is a thinking that the challenges are insurmountable. But the pessimist must not forget that challenges are to their survival as a national entity, their language, culture, and the way of life. When the issue is the matter of survival of a nation, there is no room for backtracking. The best way to pay tribute to Sardar Mengal is to change unfavorable circumstances into favorable ones. The best way to pay tribute to this noblest of the Balochistan is to continue the struggle with courage, tenacity, and honesty. The Baloch must not succumb to the pressures of unfavorable circumstances. They must show their commitment to the national cause by showing maturity and steadfastness. They must continue the struggle with full vigor to make the reality the dream of a liberated and dignified life for the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir sir. Now I'd like to request Waja Akhtar Barakzi sir. Waja Akhtar Barakzi is a veteran fighter in the Baloch national struggle and a very prominent name in Hindi Balochi literature. Dr. Barak sir, please a few words.
Good afternoon. We are today gathered here to remember and to honor the struggle carried out by Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Sardar Attaullah came into politics around 1960. I remember I was brought up in Karachi. I was in college in those days. I went to see him, and he left an impression which lasted until this day. He was very frank person, and during those conversations, he was very, very knowledgeable about not just about Balochistan, but about the region as a whole, including Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and the Middle East. To lose such a leader is a tremendous shock for the Baloch nation. But we are fortunate that he led us, although we have not succeeded to this day, but we will, as we saw the clip from his interviews. He was a believer of Baloch freedom and salvation. No matter what odds are there, Baloch will succeed. It may take a long time. It may take generations, but we are confident that this generation, young generation, and the coming generations will fight for their motherland and for freedom and dignity. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was an unprecedented man of extraordinary qualities. Although he was a Sardar, but he believed not in the Sardari system, but he believed in people, his people, not just his tribe, but his people, the Baloch. And he led his people through thick and thin. And we are indeed, as a nation, very grateful that we had a leader of his caliber among us. Now I come to the Pakistani propaganda against Baloch leadership. My friend Dr. Nasir mentioned this, that there were Pakistani authorities always said that they are miscreants. This mischief has been produced by 3 Sardars in Balochistan. Otherwise, Baloch people support Pakistan and Pakistani policies and decisions with regard to Balochistan. But it's not just 3 Sardars. If there were 3 Sardars, they would not have succeeded. It is and was the struggle of the people of Balochistan, entire people of Balochistan. In Balochistan, there are about 70 to 80 Sardars. Blaming just 3 Sardars was a futile business. Sardar I'm sorry, I don't feel well, but I will try my best to carry on. The Pakistani propaganda from the beginning was against the Baloch people because the way they annexed Balochistan, and they know that Baloch people will never ever relinquish their struggle. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Pakistani successive governments and their media channels have always blamed their failings on the Baloch, failings in Balochistan, on the people of Balochistan, and who were led by Sardar Attaullah Mengal at the head, Mir Ghaus Bakhsh Bezenjo, Sardar Khyber Khan Murray, and towards the end, Nawab Akbar Bukti. They always blamed the leaders and workers of Balochistan to be Soviet agents. They have to find an excuse. Nowadays, because there are no more Soviets, they are blaming India. And we have suddenly become Indian agents. India, we don't know whether, I wish India could support us. I wish Soviets could have supported us. We would have given them a better fight. But when they were saying that we were Soviet agents, it was in the days when they were colluding with the Americans, and they had Sinto and Seattle alliances with America. And whenever an American leader came to Pakistan, they would arrest the activists so that they cannot do something bad against the American leaders. And they would put them, scores of them, I could say hundreds of them throughout Pakistan were arrested because they wouldn't support the Pakistani government's collusion with the Americans. If you pick up Pakistani newspapers and study the media, their main propaganda is that we are foreign agents. It's the same excuse used by powerful people are powerful states against their own people, against those who oppose them, against those who do not agree with them. But I would say something. Pakistani, just by blaming or accusing people, they will not succeed at all, because the Baloch people are determined to carry on their fight, and we have been shown a bright light by the struggle of our leaders, especially Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Thank you very much. No.
Thank you very much, Wajah Barbaridi sir. Despite your health conditions, you still shed light on the life and legacy of Sardar Attaullah Mengal. We are very grateful to you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, now I will request our next speaker, Mr. Sushil Pandit. Mr. Sushil Pandit is a prominent Kashmiri leader in exile and a strong voice for the rights of the Kashmiri Pandits. Mr. Sushil Pandit, please.
Namaskar. Honorable Dr. Dastaji, Wajahatji, Lakhuji, and all of you members of Sindhi Baloch Forum here. I pay my deepest condolences for the passing of Sardar Attaullah Mengal Sahab. And I'm here to express my solidarity and solidarity of all those who are at the receiving end of the pain from the evil called Pakistan in the region where we all come from. As just mentioned, I come from Kashmir. In the Kashmir Valley, we were a small minority of Hindus who were brutally cleansed in 1990. We were less than 500,000 people, little more than 75,000 families who were spread across the valley. We did not live in clusters, so there was no security in numbers. We were turned into sitting ducks, targeted, brutalized, killed mercilessly as unarmed, defenseless civilians facing Kalashnikovs and grenades, all supplied by the state of Pakistan in the neighborhood. And ever since, the Valley of Kashmir has not seen peace. You all know how all the upheavals and disturbances in that region, all the violence, blood and gore in the region, is being attributed to something called the Kashmir dispute. And Kashmir dispute is called the unfinished agenda of partition. Partition, as we all know, is one single tragedy where all the troubles of the region are traced back. The decade of 40s was perhaps the most tragic decade the world saw. There were three humongous tragedies that happened in that decade. There was World War II, the kind of destruction humanity saw in that world war. Scores of millions perished. Nations got destroyed. It was truly a global war. None of the continents were spared. Cities, indeed Hiroshima, Nagasaki, just evaporated in the nuclear attack. The other tragedy was the Holocaust of Jews. Millions of them perished. Again, defenseless, old, women, children, in gas chambers, choked to death. And the third tragedy, partition of India. Never in the history of mankind, so many people, such a large number of people, in such a short span of time, with so much violence, were uprooted from their moorings, from their lands, from where they belong, and thrown about. The first two tragedies are still being written about. Films are being made. PhDs are being done. Research is happening. There are studies in different universities. Scholars are being produced. Literature is being written. In some cases, even trials are happening. War criminals are still being sought, though you know they must have been dead, but you are still tracing their footsteps to see where are they buried, who harbored them, in what circumstances they went missing. But it is the partition of India which was whitewashed by the succeeding states within the region itself, in India, in Pakistan. Everyone just simply lied about it, buried it. We don't have the details of what happened. Who did what, to whom. Because those who benefited from the partition, the beneficiaries of partition, got into the power, and they used that power to simply bury this humongous tragedy. But the ghost of partition refuses to stay put under the carpet or underground. The consequences of partition are still being faced. Generations after it has happened. It's not going to go away easily. It has taken too many lives. It has destroyed societies. It has destroyed habitats. And the loose ends left are still hemorrhaging, bleeding. The wounds are still open and they get opened up ever so often. Especially because what happened in Pakistan post-partition is the continuation of that genocide which was unleashed to create partition. What happened in Sindh, what happened in Balochistan, what happened in then East Pakistan, which managed to free itself from the clutches of this evil in 1971, of which it is the 50th anniversary this year. I congratulate my Bengali brothers who paid a huge price then in order to liberate themselves. And as we talk, they have overtaken their erstwhile tormentors in almost every field, whether it is economy, whether it is academia, whether it is media, whether it is polity, whether it is justice, whether it is development, in all parameters. They have succeeded in showing the world what can be achieved if you manage to free yourself from under the heels of this evil called Pakistan. But they're still stuck on those unfinished agendas of partition. The progeny of that partition and the beneficiaries of that carnage cannot seem to liberate themselves from that mindset. Their insecurities and their complexes keep haunting them. And it's the civilian population, it's the generations of ordinary erstwhile Indians and now Pakistanis and Balochs and Bangladeshis and Gilgit Baltis, Mirpuris and Muzaffarabadis and Kashmir. Even people in Punjab, Pashtuns, in some higher or lesser measure, are suffering the consequences. I remember about 5 years back when I met Lakhuji, I had a long conversation with him. I asked him, I said, coming from India, when we find ourselves in such deep trouble, we at least look up to our state as a democracy which tolerates dissent, which gives me space and hope, because we have never thrown out our constitution and staged coups. Somebody called Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani lived to be 92 years and died comfortably in his bed in the state of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, where he unleashed a genocide on us and expelled us. Died a tycoon when he started as an ordinary school teacher. I don't think in any other country in this day and age he would have survived so long and thrived so much. That is to a fault the nature and quality of the state we live under in comparison to Pakistan. But I asked him, I said, Lakhuji, Pakistan is a military state, is a genocidal state. It is perhaps the only state that uses its air force on its civilians, unarmed civilians, even today. Got away with a genocide in East Pakistan. The General Tikka Khan, who had infamously said in then East Pakistan that you hate Pakistanis so much that I will create a generation of Pakistanis from the Bengali wombs, and therefore unleashed mass rape on Bengali women. That Tikka Khan got away scot-free with his war crimes, and he was unleashed on Balochistan as soon as he reached in Pakistan, because he had acquired some kind of expertise. He was the subject matter expert in committing genocide. And as I was listening to Wajad Saab, Pakistan was the member of different military alliances, and therefore those who carried the banner of human rights and democracy those days would not see any fault in a state like Pakistan because they happen to be part of a military alliance. They sacked their consulate from Chittagong. I would urge you to go and Google Blood Telegram. Arthur Blood, who was the Consul General in Dhaka of US, they wrote a report of what kind of genocide Pakistan was committing in Bangladesh, now Bangladesh, then East Pakistan. Henry Kissinger, who was Secretary of the State, sacked that entire consulate for daring to record these gory details about an ally. So they could get away with murder. And that is what has emboldened the state of Pakistan to repeatedly commit the same atrocities. They've perfected this template. What they are doing in Afghanistan today is gut-wrenching. You've seen the images emerging from that country, what people have been driven to. We see the symptoms and identify them and blame symptoms. Today somebody is talking about Taliban. Before that somebody was talking about Haqqani network. Before that people were talking about Mujahideens. Or they talk about similar such actors, or what they also call non-state actors. We always invent these euphemisms and symptoms. Nobody targets and points out to the very root that sustains all of them. The Al-Qaedas of the world, the Talibans of the world, the Tehreeks of the world, the Lashkars of the world, the Jaishs of the world, they all derive their sustenance, resources, and indeed the idea nourishment from the evil state of Pakistan. As ordinary Balochs, Sindhis, and Kashmiris, ours is to fight in the manner we can. One of the most important frontiers to wage the battle on is the battle of narratives. We have to keep speaking the truth to the powerful, as our illustrious leaders have been doing through the decades, as we saw it being spoken here before me from such inspiring leadership that you have. Keep speaking the truth. Vehemently speaking the truth. And deny them the legitimacy. Withhold your acceptance, your concession to them. Defy. Defiance is the most potent weapon in the hands of an ordinary individual in these times. And it is this defiance which will deny them the legitimacy. And that is what hurts them the most. Because this defiance points at the countdown they have to inevitably face eventually in their collapse. And collapse they will. And it's not going to take too many generations, sir. They have bitten more than they can chew. They are withering at the edges. You can see it. And as a whole host of events we have witnessed to in the recent past, dramatic events, unbelievable events, never thought of events, too big to fail kind of phrases invented to perpetuate evil, perpetuate pain. All that will take no time to simply just disappear. You saw the most powerful disappear from Afghanistan with numerical superiority, technological superiority, resource superiority. Because the battles are fought and won here first. The Afghan battle was not lost in Jalalabad or in Herat or in Mazar-e-Sharif or in Kandahar or for that matter in Kabul. It was lost in Doha. We need to be firm here in our resolve and then leave it all to destiny. We may not be able to decide the outcome, but what we can certainly decide, you and I, is what we can offer this effort. And Lakhuji said it most eloquently then, when I said, what do we have? What hope do we have when Pakistan is such an evil state and under a kind of system where it doesn't offer any hope, any room, any space for dissent, for defiance? Lakhuji said, I know just one thing, that Sindh is my mother, and as a son of Sindh, it is my privilege to fight for my mother, irrespective of the odds that I face. Lakhuji, I'll never forget those words. With his inspiring words recounted here, I again take your leave. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish you all the luck in your studies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sushil Pandit. Thank you. Now I'll request Mr. Fahim Baloch to please come and say a few words. Mr. Fahim Baloch is a human rights activist and a member of the Baloch National Movement, a nationalist political party in Balochistan. Mr. Fahim. Thank you very much.
I'd like to speak in Urdu this time. So the audience in Balochistan, my other friends, rest of the areas in Balochistan, far from areas, so they may understand what do I mean to say. सबसे पहले मैं सलाम पेश करता हूँ सरदार अताउल्लाह मेंगल को, जिसने हर बलोच नौजवान को जोहद मुसलसल का दर्स दिया. शायद मेरी जिंदगी में बहुत ही कम ऐसा वक्त गुजरा होगा कि जब मैं किसी के बारे में कोई बात करूं तो मुझे अल्फाज को तलाश करने में मुश्किलात दरपेश हुई हो. तो सरदार अताउल्लाह मेंगल वो वाहिद शख्सियत है, उन बहुत ही गिने चुने लोगों में से एक है, इंसानों में से एक है, जिनके बारे में कुछ कहने से पहले मुझे बहुत सोचना पड़ा कि वो कौन से अल्फाज हैं जो उनके मेयार के मुताबिक हो, ताकि मैं कुछ कह सकूं उनके बारे में. एक मुफक्किर, एक उस्ताद, एक लीडर, मैं जितने भी वो खूबसूरत तरीन अल्फाज यकजा करूं और जब मैं सोचूं तो वो एक शख्स जो बनता है वो सरदार अताउल्लाह मेंगल बनता है. उन तमाम अल्फाज का जो मजमुआ है वो सरदार अताउल्लाह मेंगल बनता है. बलोच कौमी तहरीक में जो मौजूदा जमाने में हमेशा 3 सरदारों की बात की जाती है, शहीद नवाब अकबर बुख्ती, जो बलोचिस्तान की मिट्टी में इस तरह घुल गए कि उस मिट्टी का हिस्सा ही बन गए. सरदार खैर बख्श मरी, उनको जब दफनाया जाता है तो वो एक ख्वाहिश करते हैं कि मुझे शोहदाए बलूचिस्तान के कब्रिस्तान में दफनाया जाए ताकि मैं उन अजीम शोहदा के साथ रहूं. जब सरदार अताउल्लाह मेंगल की वसीयत देखी जाती है तो उनकी वसीयत वो होती है कि एक बयाबान में अपने घर से बहुत दूर उन अजीम गुल खान नसीर और उनके अजीम दोस्तों के जाए पनाह, जहां से वो गुजरा करते थे या जहां पर वो बैठा करते थे, जहां पर वो रहा करते थे, वहां पर उनको दफनाया जाए ताकि वहां पर मौजूद उनकी खुशबू उनको महसूस हो. एक दोस्त से मेरी बात हो रही थी तो वो कह रहे थे कि हम एक अनजान रास्ते की तरफ जा रहे थे, हमें नहीं था पता कि कहां उनको दफनाया जा रहा है. तो वहां पर पहुंचने से पहले हमें एक अजीब सी खुशबू महसूस हो रही थी. तो हम दोस्त आपस में कह रहे थे ये कैसी एक खुशबू है जो हम महसूस कर रहे हैं. हमें नहीं था पता कि वो जगह है जहां पर गुल खान नसीर अपने अजीम दोस्तों के साथ रहा करते थे.
नसीर खान नूरी
सॉरी,
खान आजम.
मेरे ख्याल सरदार साहब के बारे में अगर पूरी शाम भी बात की जाए तो वो ना एक खत्म होने वाला सिलसिला होगा. सिर्फ सीधा बातों के बारे में मैं उनके कहना चाहूंगा. बलोच सियासत में एक हमेशा बात की जाती थी कि बलोच सियासत एक तबकाती सियासत है. बलोचों के जो सरदार हैं या बलोचों के जो मोतबरीन हैं उनके बच्चे तो बाहर दुनिया में जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं, ऐशो इशरत की जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं और ग्राउंड पर मौजूद बलोच गरीब के बच्चे मर रहे हैं. تو میرے خیال ان لوگوں کو یہ ایک واضح پیغام دیا. میں ہسٹری میں نہیں جاؤں گا, 1839 کی ہسٹری میں نہیں جاؤں گا جب بلوچ خان خود ریزسٹ کرتا ہے. میں موجودہ زمانے کی بات کرتا ہوں کہ جب سردار عطا اللہ مہنگل اپنے بیٹے کو, اسد جان کو, بلوچستان کی سرزمین پر قربان کرتا ہے. وہ ایک ایسی قربانی نہیں کہ ایک شخص جب شہید ہوتا ہے تو آپ اس کی لاش دیکھتے ہیں, ایک دن بعد, 2 دن بعد, سال بعد آپ کو صبر آ ہی جاتا ہے کہ آپ نے اپنے ہاتھوں سے دفنایا اسے. لیکن اس کے لیے صبر کرنا بہت مشکل ہوتا ہے جس کا نہ لاش کا آپ کو پتا ہو, جس کا نہ قبر کا پتا ہو, اور ہمیشہ ایک امید ہو شاہد وہ زندہ ہے. اس طرح کی قربانی ہمارے سرداروں نے دی ہے بلوچستان کے لیے. نواب اکبر بگٹی کی مثال آپ لے سکتے ہیں, شہید بالاج کی مثال لے سکتے ہیں. تو اس سے ایک بہت ہی واضح پیغام ہے کہ بلوچستان میں کوئی طبقاتی سیاست نہیں, کوئی طبقاتی جدوجہد نہیں ہے. یہ صرف اور صرف بلوچستان کی ہے جو بلوچ سرزمین کے اولاد, بلوچ سرزمین کے فرزند اس کے لیے کر رہے ہیں, سن آف سوائلز کر رہے ہیں. آج میرے خیال جب سردار عطا اللہ مہنگل نے آج سے کچھ عرصے پہلے ایک بیج بویا تھا بلوچ سندھی فورم کے نام سے, میرے خیال آج یہاں پر موجود لوگ شاہد اس کی گواہی دیں گے کہ وہ آج ایک تناور درخت بن چکا ہے یہاں پر موجود لوگوں کی صورت میں. اسی کو بات کو لے کے آگے بڑھوں گا تھوڑا سا کہ جس طرح سردار عطا اللہ مہنگل ہمیشہ اپنے انٹرویوز میں کہتے تھے کہ باہر کے لوگ جب آپ اتحاد و اتفاق کی بات کریں گے, جب کوئی اس کی مخالفت کرے تو آپ سمجھے کہ وہ آپ میں سے نہیں. تو ان کے اسی بات کو لے کر ہم نے آگے بڑھنا ہے کہ آج ہم سب یکجا ہیں. وہ کون سے لوگ ہیں جو صرف ایک پروپیگنڈا لے کے آگے چل رہے ہیں کہ بلوچ تقسیم ہے, بلوچ یکجا نہیں. آج سب یہاں ہم یکجا بیٹھے ہیں, نہ صرف بلوچ, آج سندھی ہمارے ساتھ ہے اور دنیا کے جو مظلوم تحریک کے لوگ ہیں وہ امید ہے کہ آگے ہمارے ساتھ ہوں گے اور ہم سب ایک ساتھ ہوں گے اور آگے بڑھیں گے. میں اپنی بات اس چیز پہ اختتام کرنے کی کوشش کروں گا کہ سردار عطا اللہ مہنگل نے اپنے ایک انٹرویو میں کہا کہ آپ جدوجہد کریں, مسلسل جدوجہد کریں, چاہے آپ جس فیلڈ میں ہیں آپ اپنی جدوجہد کریں. اگر آپ جدوجہد نہیں کر سکتے تو اپنے ماں و بہنوں کو نہ رلائیں. تو انہوں نے ہمیں ایک واضح انداز میں پیغام دیا کہ آپ کے ساتھ راستہ ایک ہی ہے اور وہ ہے جدوجہد کا. جب ان سے کہا گیا کہ بلوچ اپنے ہتھیار پھینک دے تو ان کا جواب تھا کہ بلوچ کا ہتھیار کوئی نائی کا کینچی نہیں کہ وہ رکھ دے اسے. تو اس سے ایک واضح پیغام انہوں نے دیا کہ بلوچ ایک جدوجہد مسلسل کرے اور جب جدوجہد مسلسل ہوگی تو کامیابی آپ سے دور نہیں ہوگی. آپ سب کا بہت شکریہ. ایک دفعہ پھر میں سلام پیش کرتا ہوں اس عظیم موقع کو.
That was Fahim Baloch. Thank you very much, Fahim Baloch. Now I request Ms. Ruby Hook, who is President of Bangladesh Human Rights Commission UK and General Secretary of Forum for Secular Bangladesh and Gatak Tanad Medical Commission.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be gathered here today to pay our respect to Sardar Attaullah Mengal, a veteran politician from Balochistan, who died in Karachi on 2nd of September 2021 at the age of 93. Please accept our heartiest condolences from our group, Forum for Secular Bangladesh, which is in Bangla, Kathok Dollar Nirmal Committee, UK. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was Baloch nationalist leader and the first chief minister of Balochistan during 1972 till 1973. In 1954, he was declared the head of the Mango tribe. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was an eminent leader of National Army Party, NAP. By this, Comrade Mengal was introduced to the world politics. In 1962, Sardar Attaullah Mengal was elected as an MPA, Member of Provincial Assembly of West Pakistan. As an MPA, he was one of the most crucial and strongest opponents against military dictator Ayub Khan regime. In fact, one of speeches against the regime led to his arrest on charges of treason. I should mention here that Army Party NAP was also formed in Bangladesh, then East Pakistan in 1957, under the leadership of an eminent people's leader Maulana Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani through the merger of various leftist and progressive political groups in Pakistan. I should also point out that during Ayub Khan's regime, people of Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, also voted against Ayub Khan's dictatorial rule. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was known for his outspoken political leadership and his fight for the right of the Baloch people. People of Balochistan are victims of discrimination of inequalities by central government of Pakistan. Sardar Attaullah Mengal, with his political ideology, was struggling for the justice of the people of Balochistan until his last breath. In May 1972, Sardar Attaullah Mengal became the first chief minister of Balochistan. During the brief turn in office, freedom of speech and of the press were encouraged, and as a result, Balochistan became an island of freedom in a sea of political inequalities. Unfortunately, Sardar Attaullah Mengal was dismissed by the then Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1973. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was sent to jail and released in 1977 and chose self-exile in London. He was involved with Sindhi Balochistan Front in London in 1985. Sardar Attaullah Mengal returned to Pakistan and formed the Balochistan National Party in 1996. Sardar Attaullah Mengal was offered by Supreme Post of the state, including President of Pakistan and interim Prime Minister, but he declined those offers. Looking at his political career on contributing to the deprived people of Pakistan, rebellion of various character, one can see Sardar Attaullah Mengal sacrificed his life for the well-being of deprived and disadvantaged people of Balochistan. He will be considered as an icon of democratic movement. I pray for his soul to rest in peace and long life the struggle for democracy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Ms. Ruby. And I request Mr. Shahjahan Baloch to please come and say a few words. Shahjahan Baloch is a lawyer and also a member of the Balochistan National Party. Shahjahan, please.
Thank you so much, Kambarjan. First of all, respected participants and honorable speakers, and thanks to the organizers, Sindhi Baloch Forum UK, Dr. Lakhu Saab and his team, and it is an honor for me because today we are hearing Waja Akbar Barakzi, Waja Nasir Tashti. As a student, it is an honor for me to be with them. I think much has been said about life of Sardar Sahab, and there were scholarly deliberations from Waja Nasir Tashti Sahab and very deep analysis. But I will say, I may speak in English and Urdu as well, so that would be mixed, because as my friend Fahim Baloch said, we have, because this is kind of online word, so our people of Balochistan, they may understand it well. First of all, as in Balochi and Brahui we say, Sat Salam, Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Balochistan آبشاروں کی سرزمین ہے. بلوچستان کوساروں کی سرزمین ہے, سرمچاروں کی سرزمین ہے, جہاں لیلہ وطن بستے ہیں. بلوچ کی محبت ہمیشہ اس کی سرزمین سے رہی ہے. تاریخ اس کی گواہ ہے. بلوچستان ماما قدیر کا بلوچستان ہے, جس میں ایک جہد مسلسل, جس کی بات فہیم نے کی اور سردار عطاء خان نے کی, کہ جہد مسلسل ہی سے ہم منزل کی طرف جا سکتے ہیں. جیسے سردار صاحب نے کہا کہ آپ اگر پیدل چل سکتے ہیں, آپ فکری جدوجہد کر سکتے ہیں, آپ پولیٹیکل سٹرگل کر سکتے ہیں, but your journey should be for a vision of a Balochistan, prosperous, خوشحال, آزاد اور خود مختار بلوچستان, جس میں آپ کو غلامی کا احساس نہ ہو. اگر میں کہوں گا کہ بلوچستان میں وطن کے دیوانے بستے ہیں, ان کا لیلہ وطن ہے. آپ ہماری شاعری دیکھیں, ہماری جدوجہد دیکھیں, تاریخ دیکھیں, نوری نصیر خان سے لے کے آج تک جتنے بھی نوجوان, جتنے بھی لیڈر, جتنے بھی قوم پرست, انہوں نے اپنی زندگیاں قربان کی, اپنی جوانیاں قربان کی, اپنا فیوچر قربان کیا, اپنے ملک سے دربدر ہوئے, مہاجر بنے, اپنے فیملی اور خاندان کو چھوڑا. کس لیے؟ اپنی قوم کے لیے, اور اس خواب کے لیے جس کا خواب سردار عطاءاللہ نے دیکھا اور بلوچستان کے دوسرے اکابرین نے دیکھا. اس کے لیے میں, جیسے کہ سردار صاحب نے اس مٹی سے وفا کی قسم کھائی تھی, انہوں نے ثابت کیا اپنی پوری زندگی میں کہ وفا کیا ہوتی ہے, قومی ذمہ داری کیا ہوتی ہے, सियासत कैसे की जाती है और इक़्तिदार की लालच के बगैर पॉलिटिक्स का क्या मतलब है और एक कौमी तहरीक का रहनुमा होने का क्या मतलब है। वो कोई फिलोसफर अंदाज के नहीं थे। He was a very practical man. हर चीज में everything he demonstrated practically that when there is a crisis, when there is a complex issue, even when there is an opportunity, like in '88, he came and formed the Balochistan National Alliance, BNA, and he was a symbol of unity. All nationalists, non-nationalists, everyone, like from Makran to Jalawan, Jalawan to Sarawan, Sarawan to Lasbela, everyone was together and there was a Balochistan National Alliance. Because leaders just don't, वो कोई सिर्फ दुखड़े नहीं सुनाते, सिर्फ जुल्म की कहानियां नहीं सुनाते, but they take practical actions. When there is a time, are you ready to act? And I would say, when there is a time, are we ready to act? Whether politically, socially. I'm glad to see our friends from Bangladesh. I've been to Bangladesh almost 4 times. So there are inspirations. The historical complex crisis of subcontinent. I'm grateful to you, you educated us. Pandeyji, were very educational for oppressed nations and for Baloch nation. On Sardar Sahab, before I start more, an American political philosopher and politician said, that was Benjamin Franklin, if you would not to be forgotten as soon as you're dead, either write things worth reading or do things worth writing. And Sardar Sahab is the category of letter 1. We have to write, we have to understand, we have to do research about his political approach. As from my observation, from the day one, Sardar Sahab's vision was very clear. An important thing is a leader has a very clear long-term vision about Balochistan. Why? When he came to the power, the first priority was education. And still today people regard him as founder of Balochistan University, Balochistan Medical College, 200 schools, in a very limited budget and limited time. So what the lessons for us? No nation can get success in their struggle in the future without education. So Baloch nation, and it's our responsibility that we should understand the core vision of Sardar Sahib, that was education. Secondly, what was the second factor? I think second factor was political empowerment. When you are not politically empowered, you would unable to make any decisions for your future. So the second important aspect was political empowerment, in terms of political organization, in terms of having everyone on board, in terms of making the organizations more inclusive. That's why Balochistan National Party is also regarded as one of the inclusive party in Balochistan, where you find Hindu community, where you find Hazara community from Balochistan, where you can find representatives from Pashtun community. This is what inclusive vision of politics is. As he mentioned in his speech, that everyone जो भी बलूचिस्तान के सूद और ज़िया में शामिल है, वो बलोच है. That means he was not a very narrow nationalist, ethnic oriented. He had a broad political vision. And he mentioned that if I am not following the principles and values of Baloch leader, I am not part of the, like Sood और ज़िया का जिक्र किया उन्होंने, I am not Baloch. Baloch is the name of a character. It's not just an ethnic group. That's what he taught us. And most important thing is the political sovereignty, as I mentioned, the self-rule. In fact, he wanted us to be master and architect of our future. And one of the lessons, important lesson was, he was a fearless leader. You know, the fear, I will talk about it, but he was a fearless leader. Why? Because he never compromised on his principles. And dedication to the nation and oppressed nations. I strongly believe that with his leadership, if Balochistan would have given a chance to continue his tenure of 5 years in the government, with a beautiful combination of having President Joseph as a governor and Chief Minister as a Sardar Attaullah, you can imagine the chemistry, you can imagine the beautiful vision, what they did in 9 months, what they could do in 5 years. Because two priorities, education and political empowerment. And then, I know it's very limited time as well, so I will just be brief again. And interestingly, because today we're discussing about his life, I had the privilege to meet him in person. I consider myself lucky because I had a very detailed hours of conversation with him. And as people say, he was in the Academy of History and Politics. I think that meeting was, you know, like you're meeting with history without reading books. You're learning politics, dynamics of politics, dynamics of nationalism in context of Balochistan without going to a library. And he was a very fascinating person. Always a kind of humor. When I met him first time, not the first time, like when I met him during that meeting, I think there was some diagnosis going on, some operations, something. I just asked him in Bravi, I said, Sardar Sahab, hamari tabiyat na hamari. He was a bit silent, and looked at me. and whispered, said, Shahjahan, Doctor Kaniparino na bimari na ilaj. I was surprised. I thought, maybe, is it something like cancer or something? There is no treatment. He said, I have a disease which has no cure or nothing. I said, then Sardar Sahib, what doctor said? I again asked. He said, no treatment for my illness. Then he whispered, Shahjahan, periye, I'm getting old now. So that was, meeting with him was, he always considered Mir Gaunsbaksh Bizenjo his mentor, always regarded him as initial days of mentor. I will just discuss upon him because I will be again short brief. The triangle of politics. I was just, as Fahim said, it's very hard to write someone of a caliber like Sardar Attaullah Mengal. I'm glad that our seniors are here. We could learn direct experiences. But when I realized the kind of personality he was, I found a triangle of politics. As a visionary, politician and leader, there were three main characteristics. One was, as I mentioned, having a vision. Without vision, there is no leadership, which I found as a visionary leader. Second was principles, yet very clear, defined principles of life, politics, and dealing with circumstances of the world. And third important part was, in all circumstances of life, is commitment. I found this beautiful triangle of vision, principles, and commitment. And he was the flag bearer of this noble triangle. Interestingly, one of the writers described him as a radical moderate. That is an interesting phenomenon. Because when I was listening to a famous writer, Arundhati Roy, she mentioned that, is there any possibility between approach of Che Guevara and Gandhi? The two extremes as well. But there is a possibility this is just an academic question, and I think very brilliant question in current circumstances, that is there a possibility between approach of Che Guevara and Gandhi? Is there any possibility of a radical moderate? This is something, I think this is just an academic question for scholars, for researchers. They can look into it. And I think to a certain extent, this is my personal opinion without research, that Sardar Attaullah Mengal was a kind of personality based on his approach. Maybe we can learn what does it mean. But this is not conclusion, it's just a research question for scholars. This is my last part. Sardar Sahib was not a conformist. Now in politics, people like conformists. They agree. And I would quote here John F. Kennedy. He said, conformity is the jailer of freedom and enemy of growth. So that's why we need visionary, brave, principle-oriented politicians who challenge always, and Sardar Sahib always challenged all injustices, not for only Baloch, but for Pashtun, for Sindhi, and for all oppressed nations, Poonam, is one of the examples. He inspired. And today, I'm very glad that today event is in the Sindhi Center, because this reflects that he was an inclusive and visionary leader. This reflects. Lastly, I would say, I hope that the Baloch nation will resist, prosper, and follow his path. And I would suggest, as Martin Luther King said, as Sardar Sahib said, we have to continue our struggle. And I would quote here Martin Luther King: as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. And this was 1963. And I will end here. GA Balochistan, GA Sindhi, Balochistan Subscribe. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Rajan. As we have already exceeded the time allocated for speeches, I will only now request a couple of speakers to please come. We are very privileged to have the grandson of Sardar Attaullah Mengal with us today, Nuruddin Mengal, who is a well-known political figure and the organizer of Balochistan National Party in the UK. Mr. Nuruddin Mengal, please.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to thank everyone for their efforts, for being here today. सबनी का पेरी आऊं पांजो तमाम सिंधी दोस्त सबनी जो शुक्रिया अदा करन गुला आज काविश मोहब्बत और तमाम दोस्ती मूंखे इलाही ख़ुशी थी हुई कि जिन क़िस्म जो मोहब्बत ॾिनो असांखे ऐं शुक्रिया अदा कयां सभिनी जो मूंखे ख़बर है कि अवां सभिनी जो दिल में सरदार अताउल्लाह लाइ केतिरी मोहब्बत हुई और अवां खे ख़बर है कि हुन जे दिल में अवां लाइ केतिरी मोहब्बत हुई अवां जो तकलीफ़ हुन जी तकलीफ़ अवां जी ख़ुशी में हुन जी ख़ुशी हुई और समझा तो कि हालांकि वो असां कोन है मगर हुन जो उम्मीद तमाम सभी में सिंधी बलोच पश्तून हज़ारा सभी लेखा प्रेस्ट कौम आहिनि हुन जो उम्मीद जिंदा है तो चला के सिंधी जो काशी कोन है तो हाँ गुजारिश कंदुसि कि इंग्लिश में वो गाल करना मेहरबानी देखिए ये मुझे लोटी में इधर से बरात हो सकता है हमारे अब तक ये शुमायत मोहब्बत मेहरबानी बहुत मेहनत वाला और क्या इल्म आ सकता है मिलता है Allah say English money to steal. I'll speak briefly about my grandfather, mainly because I don't really have the words to describe what he meant to me. All I can say is that the life and endeavors of Sardar Attaullah Mengal, the father, the son, the brother, the husband, is equally as glorious as the struggles that he fought for his people, which we all witnessed. Apart from his unbreakable will, his fearlessness and determination, he was a man who always had the prayers of the weak and vulnerable, of each and every member of his family, of every man, woman, and child. He was there for everyone until the end. One can be so blessed to have the love and prayers that he had throughout his life, for the care, affection, and kindness and loyalty that he showed to those who were near and dear to him. And this is certainly what got him through the immense hardships and difficulties, challenges that he faced throughout his lifetime. Every human has their ups and downs in life. That is how life is. But it is how you deal with those phases in your life. It is how you conduct yourself, how you behave towards others, and how you show faith that defines you. Sardar Attaullah shined not only in each of these phases, but he shined far brighter in the dark times. To keep the morale of the oppressed people that he spoke up for, to keep their morale high. He shined brighter through the sufferings and pain. He never gave up, never lost hope, fearlessly remained steadfast and committed to his resolve. Now I want to point out that this fearlessness was deeply rooted in his love for his motherland and his people. It took love and compassion to do what he did in his life. I often think about how a man driven with such love, who had so much in his heart for the people that he cared about, could bear with the pain, sufferings, and loss of their loved ones. It's not that he didn't feel it, he endured it. It was the dark times of his life that defined him. And it is his fortitude, his resilience, and his sacrifices that will remain a hallmark of his legacy. Yet in both ups and downs, he remained a man of the people. He was never unjust to those who stood up against him, and he never caused anyone misery. I doubt that in our lifetime we will find such a man who had so many qualities. Because now we live in an age of compromise. And that is something he was never willing to do. And an age of compromise that we live in, where most aren't even willing to endure so much, they're not willing to go to such lengths for matters beyond themselves. It was the willingness and determination to face the pain and sufferings, despite all the opportunities at his feet, that made him who he was and what he was. And quite simply, without that, there cannot be another Sardar Attaullah. He would never ever want for his people what he would not want for his own son. He was the kind of person who would, whether you were against him or you were with him, would look at you right in the eye and tell you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear. That is what made him a leader, unlike many of this era that we live in. So that is not only the name of a man, it's the name of a way of life. It's the name of a vision, a cause, an idea. So Attaullah is the name of compassion, of courage. So Attaullah is the name of humanity, of justice, of sacrifice, of love, and unity. Unity is something he strived for, not only amongst his own people, but also for nations, oppressed nations. And he became a symbol of unity. I don't know if many of you know, but he lived in the UK and even his home, back home in Balochistan, it was his home was called the Sanctuary. And truly, anybody, he was always a protector to those who were weak, who were in need. And I believe that we should now hold him in the sanctuary of our hearts. And keep him alive. I simply think that men like him don't die. That is not a word that I feel should be associated with such a man. That is not a word that should be used in the same sentence. I firmly believe that men like him are immortalized. He is far more powerful today than he was 3 weeks ago. He has kindled a flame of love, passion, never lived for very long. And who knows, maybe he has woken many up and caused many to go in the same footsteps as him. With his passing, many have seen how it is to become immortal with the sort of dedication and the sacrifices that he made throughout his life. And like the stars above us, he is now very far from the reaches of his tormentors. One thing I am certain about, like the sun, moon, and stars, he will outlive his tormentors. And he will outlive the tyrants who are yet to be born. Good will always triumph evil. And lastly, I just like to simply say, हम रहे या ना रहे, खुदा सब हमेशा रहे.
Very much, Sardar. Thank you. May I request Aisha Siddiqui Sahibah to please come on the stage and say a few words, please. Aisha Siddiqui is an eminent academic and an expert on military affairs and militancy and extremism in South Asia, and she is associated with the University of London SOAS. Aisha Siddiqui, sir.
Thank you so much. I don't know which language to use, whether to speak in English or Urdu. But I think one language that I will definitely use is that of love and respect, which everybody will understand, irrespective of the language I use. आज हम इकट्ठे हुए हैं अताउल्ला मैंगल साहब के लिए, जो कि हम में आज नहीं है, छोड़ के चले गए हैं, लेकिन उनकी याद जो है वो हमेशा रहेगी. And you know, whatever one says about him isn't enough, because he was definitely an amazing man. He was a man who gave. He was a man who cared about people, his own people. He was a man who knew when to start and also when to stop. I mean, I would say that just besides being a politician, besides being a Baloch and a Baloch leader and a Baloch politician, and a South Asian politician, I would say, an amazing South Asian politician that we need to learn from. My friend Muhammad Taki recently wrote an article about Sardar Sahab, talked about him as a moderate radical. That's one perspective. The other is that Sardar Sahab indeed was a great strategist. मतलब उनको पता था कि जंग कब शुरू करनी है और जंग को रोकना कब है. वो एक जो कॉन्सेप्ट होता है स्ट्रेटेजिक रिट्रीट का, और हमने देखा कि वो जानते थे, क्योंकि उनको बलोच लोगों की जिंदगी और उसकी वैल्यू का बहुत अच्छी तरह पता था. और जब आपका मुकाबला एक ऐसी रियासत से हो जो कि ना माफ करती है, ना सांस लेने देती है, और जो जिसकी जुल्म की इंतहा नहीं रहती, तो ऐसी रियासत के साथ मुकाबला करने के लिए आपको यू नीड स्ट्रेटजी, यू नीड टू बी क्लेवर, यू कांट बी इमोशनल ऑल द टाइम, एंड ही न्यू इट. And Sardar Sahab, both of them, who's also the first to sacrifice for his people. I mean, let's not forget that his son was probably the first missing person of Balochistan and Balochistan. Attaullah Mengal. He lost his two sons. He lost his sons when he was in jail. And he was the man who sacrificed. He was giving. He shared his land. He gave his land to his own people. So, for the Pakistani state, which always looks down upon Baloch politicians, looks down upon Baloch Sardars and always
presents them as, predatory, who don't care about people. I think Sardar Attaullah Mengal was definitely an example of leaders who cared about the people. And I think younger generation of Baloch must remember that. It's a very sad day that we are here not in conversation with him, but in conversation about him. I wish he was here today and telling us how to move forward. There are minority groups, there are ethnicities who are constantly at war with the Pakistani state. A lot of you here are Baloch and there are Sindhis as well who are sitting in this crowd. I'm a Saraiki myself, and I know that how difficult it is, how tough it is to to engage with the state and remind the Pakistani state that people have identities which are dearer to them than what the state offers. This is a conversation which is very difficult, and Attaullah Mengal, Mr. Pasenjo, Sardar Nawab Bukti, there is a generation which has made their lives, who have suffered trying to communicate and convince the Pakistani state of that. Pakistani state does not understand it. They never have and they never will. And therefore, I think in his memory, in memory of people like him, we need to think about what does one do? How do you educate? And then let me be very honest. I mean, I'll speak to you, I'll speak to my Baloch brothers and sisters sitting here as a Saraiki, and let me tell you, this is a conversation that we have. We Saraikis have sometimes, not all, but some of us do. And what comes back to us is that in order to, talk about your identity, in order to pursue the case of your identity, your nationalism, it's important to understand the cost of it. And how best to go about it. Passion needs to come with deep thinking and a plan. And my submission, I'm not going to take long, but my submission today is that we all need to join hands. Let me be very honest. I mean, I think what friends from, for example, the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement realized that, and it was very important realization, that they did not want to give the state an opportunity to attack us. It still does, but still, it's unable to attack them, because what Pashtun Tahaffuz movement has done, I mean, it's a very interesting and important strategy they've adopted. They said, we're not going to allow the state to kill us. And I think this is a conversation we need to have. We cannot allow the Pakistani state to take away precious Baloch lives. Be it attacks in the courts, on lawyers against, in the courts in Quetta, or be it anywhere else. Be it the youngsters who are picked up every day, whose loved ones are made to suffer. Those mothers, the stories of those mothers. I think this is the time when we need to think, when you people also need to think. How to spread, reach out to the world. I mean, these are stories which need to be told. And there has to be a coming together to plan how to secure the Baloch youth, how to put dreams back into their heads, how to take away violence from them. And one last thing I think, which is very important, it's very nice that we've gathered together to remember a great leader, but I hope the Baloch leadership in particular is going to think about it and find a way to actually dedicate a scholarship to something that allows young Baloch to come and study in the UK or somewhere else. There has to be a more constructive way than us, a few people, coming together one single day. He has to be an ongoing memory. He has to be part of our thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sindhi Sardar. Now, our last speaker is Dr. Lakhu Lohana sir. I'll request him to come on the stage. Dr. Lakhu Lohana, I must say, is among the very few people who had the privilege to not only interact with Sardar Attaullah Mengal, but also, together with him, found the foundations of Sindhi Forum, which is actually organizing this tribute to Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Dr. Lakhu Lohana sir, please.
Thank you. First and foremost, I do not know where to start from. We have gathered here today to pay tribute to Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Who, in addition to many, or his entire struggle, he was the founder and mentor of Sindhi Baloch Forum. On behalf of Sindhi Baloch Forum, I'm really grateful to all of you who have joined us today to pay tribute to Sardar Attaullah. My particular thanks to Social Pandit, Adi Rubi Haq, Lakshmi Kaulji, Sai Barakli, Adi Aisha, and all the speakers. It is a life of 92 years, and it is a struggle of 75 years. It is more than the life of many people, because in Pakistan, the current average age is 63 years. And in these, when Sardar Attaullah was still a teenager, he was 19, when his motherland, his fatherland, his land was forcibly annexed and occupied. He started his journey, and like we all do in our lives, he took a path. Things become very clear in his mind, which over the period evolved and matured him. It was a 75 years of continuous, unceasing struggle for his people and for his motherland. And if you look at the role of the people, individuals on history, and leaders on history, they are unique combination and processes through which they develop. Sardar Attaullah, because of his consistency, in 75 years he didn't differ for a single moment what he believed in. He was an expert doctor who knew what was the root of the problem, the root of the evil. He knew that. And he knew the remedy for that as well. He knew there's only one remedy. And that is not, he showed us, this is not only the remedy for the Baloch nation, it is the remedy for every nation that is occupied and enslaved. In these 70 years of his continuous struggle, he made sacrifices, personal sacrifices. He saw the massacre and genocide of his people. On his outer, he was very strong. When he used to talk, he never used to mince words. Sitting in lion's den, he said the truth and never deterred from not saying it, what he believed. He was very straightforward. He was, his exceptional capacity of presenting his case of his people, of his motherland. He had many, like Nodin said, other Ruby said, he had opportunities. He was offered the highest possible post in Pakistan, President and Prime Minister. For him, that was like a dirt, and he refused it. He was a visionary. Visionary are those people who can see beyond their times. Say, for example, in this country, when they plan for 100 years. Sardar Attaullah saw what his nation needs to reach to the goal. And say, for example, he became the chief minister only when Pakistan, in the past, in my belief, Pakistan is at its weakest now, but we'll come to that point later. When Pakistan, in its history, was at its weakest, when half of its army surrendered after committing one of the worst genocides of 20th century in Bangladesh. Adi Ruby's parents will be witness to it. And was made only chief minister for 9 months. And in these 9 months, what he did, Baloch nation is reaping the benefits of these even today. The establishment of educational institutions, land reforms, even he presented a bill to end the Sardari system, which was rejected because they needed by the center, because they needed Sardar collaborators. In these 9 months only, he did the changes, and these are the which they knew what are the needs of the Baloch nation. And unlike, because there's a very unique thing about Sardar Attaullah Mengal. Generally speaking, people coming from feudal or Sardari background, they don't need organizations because they are like, it is a modeling of king. In Balochistan, Sardar Attaullah is the only one who formed numerous organizations fit for the purpose. Because he believed individuals will go organizations will continue. Like, say, for example, Sindhi Baloch Forum is still here and working and functional and doing its purpose, serving the cause of them. He, for example, established Sindhi Baloch Pashtun Forum to bring the oppressed nations, because he thought this is the war that we have to do together, because the enemy is so cunning and so powerful and so ruthless and so fascist. The fighting the war on their own will be really very, very difficult. So he established, he was the founder of course there are other people, nothing is established with one person, but he was the founder of Sindhi Baloch Pashtun Forum. He was the founder of PUNAM, Pakistan Oppressed Nations Movement. He established Balochistan National Party. He, for the purposes, because he believed it's really very important to reach out, to reach the world, to tell them what is happening. He believed that advocacy is really a very, very important tool, and he was the mentor and established Sindhi Baloch Forum so that we can work together. He sincerely believed that the destinies of Baloch and Sindhi nations are intertwined. And that is why, and he worked for it, he believed for it. For example, Sindhi Baloch Forum is one example, Pakistan Oppressed Nations Movement, Baloch Sindhi Pashtun Front. And that is why he is respected in Sindh, not only as a leader of Baloch nation, he is respected as a leader of Sindhi nation and Sindhi people. People, there are billions of people are born and billions of will die. Only few, because of their struggle, because of their charisma, because of vision, wisdom, they will determine the course of history. There will be many, many other factors as well. But Sardar Attaullah believed, in addition to all forms of struggle, the most important form of struggle is the political struggle, political mobilization, political awareness, political education. And he worked for it. And that is why BNP is still the most regarded, because the space that is given to the politics is shrinking. They are suffocating every day. They are suffocating us. They are taking little space that is even left to us. But even within that very, very limited space, it is because of his vision that BNP is raising the voice for the Baloch people and has got the legitimacy to rise it. He had always a dream in his eyes, and he worked for it. There is saying, a cause is not worth to live for if it is not a cause worth to die for. And he knew that. He paid the price personally. National suffering and sorrows, he had a dream. He had a dream of freedom of his people, freedom of the motherland, justice of his people, for his people, dignity for his people. And the ownership of the land and the destiny of the people of Baloch people for Balochistan. He not blinked his eye for a single moment not to see that dream. And taking this dream in his eyes, he closed these eyes. But he has rekindled this dream in the eyes of every Baloch people in Balochistan, and all over the world. The dream of the freedom, of dignity, of ownership of the land. And he definitely believed, and we believe, that nothing in the world can deny that dream. That dream will come true. And therefore, his role, like all legends, legends are part history, part stories, and part myths, and all that. He will, when that day will come, one of the important contributors to the fulfillment of dream will be Sardar Attaullah Mengal. There is a verse in Sindhi, Assi je muasi safar mein wasati, Assi je muasi safar mein wasati, Tamani da manzila pehda dhola dati. If he die in the course of the journey, we sure our people will reach to the goal of freedom and liberation and peace and dignity and justice for our land. Thank you very much once again.